So you can see shadows. The artist Rembrandt tortured himself to see shadows. Leonardo da Vinci would meticulously observe shadows. But modern painters have discovered that shadows and darkness, shadows and light, shadows of color, shadows, are full of vitality. You'll begin to see vivid purple shadows. People might say, well, you don't go around with a purple shadow on you, do you? But do you think a shadow is brown just because you've never really looked at it? You don't realize that shadows are absolutely vibrant with light. We'll go more into that later when we come to number 7. But there it is. The world we see or think we see isn't the world at all. It's a selection of things in the world, governed by certain symbolic processes. What a man ought to look like, what a woman ought to look like. We even try to dress and behave in ways that fit these symbolic expectations. So, we think there's only a certain kind of work worth doing. You ought to be a tinker, tailor, soldier, sailor, doctor, lawyer, merchant, or chief, whatever it is. You're expected to fit into one of these roles. But think about it. There are innumerable things one might do. The possibilities are infinite. Still, we prefer to classify. Are you a Republican or a Democrat? Left wing or right wing? Christian, Jew, Baptist, Methodist, Muslim, what are you? We want to categorize you, to fit you into a symbolic compartment. Now, why is that? This kind of consciousness, this watchful state, is based on a peculiar specialization of the human brain, what we call conscious attention. Conscious attention is the ability to focus awareness on what we call one thing at a time. It's like a spotlight, while the rest of awareness is a floodlight. Every nerve in your body is receiving input all the time. You are taking in the totality of your surroundings, yet conscious attention flips from point to point, making sense of what it sees by adding it up with memory. From one perspective, this ability is a tremendous advantage. It's like radar for a ship, scanning the surroundings for changes in the environment, unexpected threats or opportunities for advancement. But conscious attention needs programming. We teach babies what to focus on. Watch out for cars. Look out for that dog. This programming is their radar. The problem is, as a society, we've put so much importance on radar that we believe that's all we are. We identify ourselves with the radar and ignore the rest. When I say, I walk, I talk, I think, I run, I identify with conscious actions. But other processes, the beating of my heart, the functioning of my glands, the shape of my bones, are seen as things that happen to me, not as things I am. It's as if the body is just a vehicle we go around in, like a car. If I say to a young woman, gee, you're beautiful, she might reply, oh, you're just like a man. All you think about is bodies. I want to be admired for myself, not my chassis. She's disowned herself, saying, I got my body from my parents. Or a child might say, I never asked to be born. But that child doesn't realize something crucial. When their father had that gleam in his eye, that gleam was them. The fetus, the baby, it was all them. Waking consciousness ignores this. It sets arbitrary limits on what you are. You become just that voluntary center, the spotlight sweeping over the environment. This is amplified by languages that break things into sequences, like alphabets. We spell everything out, one thing after another. In contrast, ideographic languages like Chinese allow you to take in meaning all at once. For example, the word Tao in Chinese conveys its essence in a single image. In English, it takes a whole sentence to describe. Nature, too, exists all at once. Everything happens everywhere simultaneously. Meanwhile, conscious attention only captures fragments, turning them into a linear story. Thankfully, we have subconscious processes that handle the rest, allowing us to walk without stumbling, drive while chatting, and function seamlessly. But in cultures where spotlight consciousness is exalted, this balance is disrupted. People identify solely with their troubleshooting side and forget the harmonious processes that sustain them. We end up perpetually on edge, always watching. This vigilance can lead to a life not worth living, like trying to be God, always in control of everything. And what happens? We protect ourselves so well that we become something no longer worth protecting. It's the paradox of defense. If defeating the enemy makes us just like them, what have we gained? The same happens in war. Originally, soldiers were meant to protect women and children. Now, they're often the first casualties while the guards guard themselves. It's layers of defense protecting other layers, turning humans into mollusks, soft inside, hard outside. This constant watchfulness creates a life devoid of joy. Relaxation, breathing, and simply being are dismissed as unproductive. But the truth is, the processes sustaining us are beautiful. The harmony of our existence doesn't require constant scrutiny. It simply is. So why not let go? Why not trust in the deeper, subconscious rhythms of life? Keep your own counsel, and especially watch out for women. They have a way of worming secrets out of you in exchange for their favors, which you want so much. So don't ever get too close to a woman. You can have concubines and prostitutes to satisfy your physical needs, but don't fall in love. Trust no one. Then, arrange it so that everybody around you mistrusts everyone else. You set up what's called a kind of negative Mandela. Mandela has a circle of power. You arrange it so that your immediate ministers are at odds with their subordinates. Why? Because if your immediate ministers betray you, their subordinates, who want to take their superior's position, will report them to you. Then you'll knock off the Grand Vizier and replace him with someone else, someone foolish enough to want that position. Outside that rank, you have another rank of people at odds with those above them. And so it continues all the way down. Divide and rule. Meanwhile, you live at the center of it all, with a secret passage connecting your innermost chamber to somewhere down the river, where you've got a boat waiting in case anything goes wrong. On your way out, there's a keystone you can remove. By removing this keystone during your escape, the entire palace collapses, killing everyone inside. It even gives you architectural instructions on how to design this. Then, of course, you have to have poison testers for your food. Eat nothing till someone else has tried it first to see if they drop dead. You'll also need guards standing beside you, day and night. But wait, there are other guards hidden behind panels in the walls, secretly watching the guards who are guarding you. So, you can never really sleep, at least not without one eye open. You can never be an ordinary, inconspicuous individual who takes carefree walks in the park. You've got to be in control 24 hours a day. Do you see how Big Brother, this is a Hindu version of Big Brother, is the greatest prisoner of all? He's captive to his own survival system. He can never truly relax. He's always playing God, the personal autocratic monarch of the universe. You might think that's courageous or admirable, but in the end, the game isn't worth the candle. That's the lesson here. Always watch that what you fight for is actually worth fighting for. If not, you'll end up fighting just for the sake of fighting. And then, you're fighting for nothing. You have now to tell them to shut up and try to stop thinking, that is to say, interior talking. Now, you can't force it to shut up. That is why one of the classical aids to meditation is concentration. Finding something to focus your attention on so that the chattering will cease. It should be something interesting, not interesting in the sense that you can think of many ideas about it, but something that is enormously fascinating for its purely sensuous aspects. The female form is not too appropriate for this purpose, nor the male form for women. If they find that very fascinating, it's because it has so much social junk attached to it, so many associations. One inclines, instead, to choose something like jewelry, a crystal, a flower, or a purely abstract play of light patterns. Something that serves as a support for contemplation. It should be something you don't need to think about, something you can look at in rapt fascination. As you acquire this way of becoming wordlessly interested and fascinated with any focal point of consciousness, you will begin to see, as your eyes move, that the whole world is like that. For example, you become aware of the myriad colors playing around on the floor. This isn't about trying to see how many things you can notice. It's not a game like the one children play where a tray of assorted objects is displayed for a minute, then covered, and you write down how many you saw. It's not like that. On any given tray, there are infinitely many things, and you could never count them all. It isn't about how many things you can see. The point is to have a clear window to look through instead of a dirty one. When that happens, the whole of the senses, that is to say, everything seen, tasted, touched, and smelled, becomes much clearer. As you learn not to think about it, everything becomes much richer than when you think about it. Everything starts to be more real, more alive, more glowing. You suspend judgments about things, what is good, what is bad, and in doing this, you introduce yourself to a fascinating world. That is why some Indian yogis practice what is called mauna silence. Some remain silent for 10 years, some for all their lives. After practicing silence for even a month, you get silence in your head as well. Now, there are dangers to this. For instance, when you see the clouds, you might become the cloud. If you're walking down a street during a riot, you might join the riot because that's what's happening, you just go with it. So, one doesn't enter Mauna without a guru or some kind of discipline that protects you, one that builds a protective wall around your experiment. It's like the shell a bird builds around the young chick before it's ready to hatch. In the ordinary way, a Western person negotiating a high civilization can't be silent all the time. But for sanity, it's important to be silent some of the time, silent inside the head. Just as you must stop talking occasionally to hear what someone else has to say, you must stop thinking to find out what there is to think about. If you talk all the time, you'll have nothing to talk about except talking. If you think all the time, you'll have nothing to think about except thinking. You'll exhaust yourself and come to a dead end, which is called psychosis. For health, it's important to stop thinking, not always, but enough that you find a non-thinking state as a background to the thinking state. This corresponds to what Zen Buddhism calls floodlight awareness, as a background to spotlight awareness. This non-thinking state is called munin in Japanese. Mu means no, and nin means thought. It also refers to blocking a jerky mind, let's say. This state I'm describing is the state of munin, of no thought. But it doesn't imply an anti-intellectual attitude. Hakuin, a Zen monk from the 17th century, writes in one of his poems about taking hold of the no-thought in the midst of thoughts. That means having a mind like a mirror. The Chinese Taoist said, "The perfect man employs his mind as a mirror. It grasps nothing. It refuses nothing. It receives, but does not keep." As another poem says, "The wild geese do not intend to cast their reflection. The water has no mind to retain the image. This is a mind without attachments." In English, the word attachment doesn't fully convey the Buddhist sense. A more modern term like hang up is closer. When we say someone's all hung up, that's the Buddhist meaning of attachment. It's a mental or emotional fixation on a particular pattern of life. To get rid of hang-ups, you first need to get rid of thinking. Once you've done that and revived the background, the mirror mind, you can return to thinking. Then, you can think against this background without getting hung up on it. In this way, you gain an extraordinary feeling of life as a single, flowing process that doesn't stick. You and it are all one, with countless differentiations, so it doesn't become a formless blur. Instead, it flows like water, like sunlight reflected in ripples. This flow comes from having no hang-ups. The royal road to this state involves giving up the sense of urgency, that you ought to do something, that something is required of you. For instance, looking at a rubber band on your fingers can be as important as anything else you can do. Being here, at this moment, and listening to my voice without caring about its meaning can be just as meaningful as anything in the universe. Why not? Is the tree outside important? Is beautiful? Is it worth looking at? Certainly. But it's not achieving any grand mission. It's just being a tree. As Emerson said in his essay on compensation, "These roses under my window are not concerned whether they are better than last year's roses, or whether next year's roses will surpass them. There is simply the rose. It lives for today." That's the point. When you learn meditation in this way, you'll see people rushing around wildly like chickens with their heads cut off. They think they're going somewhere, but they're deluded. They're already there and they don't know it. You'll begin to understand. You are here now. From this perspective, you'll see that people are natural processes just like trees, birds, and clouds. Do you ever criticize a cloud for being badly shaped? Or see foam patterns making an aesthetic mistake? No, they simply are. In the same way, human beings simply are. When you see this about yourself, you'll realize there's no need to go anywhere or improve yourself. With all your defects, selfishness,